a natural disaster or some kind of terrorist attack, it says that he stays in as a dictator. Of course not. But what it does use is this. I'll actually quote to you. This is what it does say. Under an economic condition, a national crisis, it says this: the president shall lead or control the activities of the federal government for ensuring constitutional government. You can read it word for word. It says that they give comity. Comity means that they acknowledge that there is a Supreme Court and a Congress, but it says that there are two. You can actually read it word for word. I've read this. It says that there are two people in charge of the nation in case of an attack, an economic disaster, or a natural disaster. Guess who the two people in charge are? The President and the Secretary of Homeland Security. The Secretary of Homeland Security will control all security of the entire nation. This is what this says. Now, does that sound like something Hitler did? Why did President Bush do that? Does he know something that we don't know? Is he expecting something to take place before he leaves office? And here's another one, the Looking Glass News. It says Bush challenges hundreds of laws. Bush usually does not veto laws. What he does, he attaches what are called executive, he has an executive signing attachment, which means that on the end of the law, he puts a post-it note, for lack of better terms, and he says, this is what I will obey, and this is what I will not obey, based on my presidential executive prerogatives. And this article tells you what laws and what things he has bypassed to be able to create already a virtual dictatorship, although, of course, he's not doing it yet. FEMA concentration camps. How many of you have heard of that right there? This is actually the Department of Homeland Security just put out a multi-million-dollar package to the military-industrial complex, to the company called Halliburton. Anyone ever heard of Halliburton? Vice President Richard Cheney used to be the CEO of Halliburton. Isn't that interesting? And Halliburton just received a multi-million-dollar contract from the Department of Homeland Security to build camps, internment camps all over the U.S. And it has a list of all the executive orders since President Richard Nixon, that undermine our constitutional liberties. And then, of course, this happened last month. This is written July 9th, 2008. FISA, the Congress met and approved the spying bill that now we no longer officially, before July 9th, it was debated at least. After July 9th, Congress finally voted as a law that we no longer have any privacy. You realize that? Your cell phones, your phone lines, your credit card transactions, everything can be recorded and reported on. And if there are certain types of key words that are typed in, things perhaps like Constitution, or anti-government, it'll enter you into a computer system and, of course, report you as a terrorist. And, of course, here is an anti-terrorism intelligence section. And they have now started spying programs around the U.S. Our head elder of our church in Los Angeles, Palmdale, he is a trash collector in Los Angeles, so he is a county employee. And recently he handed me a brochure in our church, or as we had fellowship in his home, and he said, guess what our supervisor just sat down and told us about? And they had a meeting with all county employees of how to recognize terrorists and spy on your neighbors. This reeks of Stalin's communist Russia, doesn't it? Spy programs. Psst, psst, my neighbor homeschools. And you may be reported as a terrorist. And here's what it says. It even has a terrorist hotline. Terrorist threat tip line, 1-877-A-THREAT. Again, 1-877-A-THREAT. What to look for? What to look for? Individuals who do not fit the surrounding environment. Dress in bulky or inappropriate attire for the location or time of year, so be careful wearing a jacket in town. Individuals who show unusual interest in building security systems or access to restricted or sensitive areas. Individuals who loiter around buildings, parking lots, or other general locations not generally open to the public. Individuals making diagrams, taking notes, photographs, or videos in areas not normally of interest to tourists. Towards multiple sightings of the same suspicious person, vehicle, or activity, separated by time, distance, or direction. Individuals who do not appear to have a means of support. Neighbors who customary furnishings or utilities or whose habits seem odd. Neighbors who receive deliveries or visitors at odd or unusual times. Any activity that appears suspicious or out of place to you. Now, does that sound kind of ambiguous? It makes everybody seem like a terrorist. There's another one, I forget on what state website you can go to. It says that men who wear blue jeans and seem like nice guys are potential suspects. I'm not joking. It's ridiculous. It is making a state of fear, is what it's doing. Fear generates police states. Do you know that? Anyone wonder why ever since President Bush has been in office, the orange level has never been down below the orange level on the terrorist, what am I looking for? Alarm system or whatever you call it. You know, you go into an airport. Matter of fact, flying to Phoenix. I flew to Phoenix. I had to fly out of LAX. I grew up across the street from LAX. When I was a child, matter of fact, we lived on Imperial Highway and Imperial Avenue. Imperial Highway was right there. There was actually no other homes across from us. We could look. I lived in an apartment building, and I could look across the street at the airport. And they would, rev up their engines, and our walls would shake. And you would have to, when I was little, we would watch cartoons. We'd have to turn up the volume until the plane took off and turn it back down. And I remember when I was young, I used to go play in the airport. I go play around and try to find carts and return them for, a quarter, 50 cents. I was able to walk right into the terminal, walk right up to the door. People were getting off the plane. Everyone remember those days? I'm young. I remember those days. And now, can you do that anymore? Here's what happened. This was just yesterday. Yesterday, driving to LAX, I got on a little bus, parked in my car, and as we started going to the airport, it was blocked off by policemen. Departing and arriving flights, you had to go through a police checkpoint, and they were routinely pulling people over, going under the car with mirrors, popping trunks, asking people questions. This is in Los Angeles. Then when we walked inside the airport, of course, you have to get, the security is phenomenal. Then when you have to check in bags, you run it through an x-ray machine before you can even check it on the plane. Then you have to go through another line where you show your government identification just to get to where you can be strip searched. And they shine a little blue light to make sure that your license is real. Anyone been to an airport lately? Then after that, you go to another line, and you stand, and you have to take off your shoes and take out your anyone know what I'm talking about? It is humiliating. It is a form of control. And as I walk through, this was yesterday, I walked through, and when I go on these little weekend things, I just take one bag. I just try to get on there, get out of there. And as I walk through, there was a lady being patted down. Some middle-class lady just sitting there, and she was getting patted down by another woman in a TSA uniform with the Homeland Security patch on the back with that Nazi-looking eagle in there. And here she is looking just like, what did I do? As she's getting patted down by a female officer so she could put on her clothes again, or her shoes and sock, and get to her plane. Did you know that recently the Homeland Security is discussing shock bans for getting on flights? What's that? Anyone heard of that? That means that before you get on the plane, you get to put on a wristband and then get herded onto the plane like cattle, and if you act out of line, they can push a button and it will shock you. Where are we today, brothers and sisters? And we're Pope in Austria. Did you know that in Austria, the Pope just pushed for a day of worship? Did you know that in another European country, they just passed a national Sunday law? Croatia, thank you.